Hey, hello everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube show, Ruben's History Show. Today, I am going to talk about how the Soviet political system worked and what were its structures in the former Soviet Union. So, the Soviet Union was a country. It was located. It's located in Europe and Asia, which is present day Russia. It's present day Russia today, or modern day Russia. The Soviet Union was governed by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, which was its political party, because Soviet Union was a one party state. Its main party was the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So that was its one party they had in the Soviet Union. So it was a one party state. There were no other parties in the Soviet Union, and their economy was their economy. They had the Soviet economy, but the economy was basically like with money and everything. So that's what the economy was in the country. So, and then also in the Soviet Union, we didn't, for example, you didn't vote for your leader like you do in the United States. You don't vote for your leader in the Soviet Union. The Central Committee, which was the executive leadership of the Soviet Union, or it was kind of like it elects its leader. It decides who's going to be the new leader of the Soviet Union. So people did not have the right to vote in the Soviet Union, to vote for their leader, like you do, like you guys, like the president in the presidential elections, for example, like in the 2016 and the 2008 elections in the United States. So, and people did not have the right to vote. There was no political freedom in the Soviet Union. There was no political freedom in that country. So, and they also had a Congress, and they had the Politburo. The Politburo were these top government officials in the Soviet Union, they were ahead of everybody. They were top government officials in the USSR. They were top. They were the head of everybody in the Soviet Union. And in the early 1970s, under the leadership of Leonid Brezhnev, when Brezhnev was General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, the Soviet economy growing much faster under was growing much faster under Brezhnev time, because Brezhnev started under the Soviet Union under Brezhnev era, or Brezhnev period. The Soviet Union started making a lot of money by selling oil. Then the oil prices increased. The oil prices went up under Brezhnev time. And so, and then the oil prices increased, and the Soviet economy was doing very well. And there was a lot of stuff in the shelves, in the stores. There were a lot of stuff in the stores under Brezhnev time, when Brezhnev was leader of the Soviet Union. So under Brezhnev time, they say that under his rule, it was the best time, because, in fact, my grandma thought that Brezhnev time was a good time, because he was selling oil in the Soviet Union, and a lot of people quite loved him. They loved him a lot because of the stuff that he was doing in the during his rule as the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, or in Russian it would be General Sekretar SKKPSS, which means the General Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So that's what it means in the Russian language, if you translate it to Russian. So, and the economy was growing much faster under Brezhnev time than the economy was going way much faster under Brezhnev time than it was in the United States. United States economy was going very slow, and the Japan's economy was growing slower at the time, and Soviet Union was making a lot of money by selling oil, and the oil prices cost 84%. That's how much the oil cost under Brezhnev time. And the oil prices cost 48%, 84%. That's how much the oil cost under Brezhnev's rule as leader of the Soviet Union. So he was the leader leader of the country for a long time, and people loved him for what he did for the Soviet economy. And then, but before Brezhnev took power as leader of the Soviet Union, people under Khrushchev time were living very poorly because people did not live in houses, and people were poor under Khrushchev's rule. And then so under Khrushchev time, the Soviet Union started building these apartment buildings, also known as Khrushchevsky project or Khrushchev's project, which was the project in the Soviet Union that was held from the late 1950s. I believe it was 1950s, 1958, 1959, or 57 under Khrushchev time, and that lasted all the way to 1960, when he was overthrown by Leonid Brezhnev on October 14th, 1964. So a lot of apartment buildings were built under Khrushchev time, when Khrushchev was leader of the Soviet Union. And then after the death of Brezhnev, the Soviet Union elected Yuri Andropov, who was going to be the next leader of the Soviet Union following Brezhnev's death on November 10th, 1982. So the Central Committee would elect the new leader of the Soviet Union. So that's basically what the Central Committee would do. They would elect their leader they would elect someone who would take the position as leader of the Soviet Union. So somebody would take over that position, and then in the late 70s, and it was in 1979 when Brezhnev invaded Afghanistan, the Soviet economy was not doing very well. It became corrupt, and it stagnated. Stagnate basically means that something in the government is not moving. So that's basically what stagnation means. It's that something in the government does not move, or something in the economy does not move. So a lot of people were out late missing work at that time because people did not show up to work, and they started missing some days at work or college, and they did not appear at work that often because of the corruption that was going on in the Soviet Union. So at the time, there was a corruption that was known as the economic stagnation, which took place under Brezhnev time, when Brezhnev invaded Afghanistan in 1979, in December 1979. And that corruption that lasted for many years, from 1979 all the way to the late 80s, when Gorbachev made his reforms, Perestroika and Glasnost, which were his two reforms to fix the Soviet economy and to destroy the Soviet Union. So those were his two reforms at the time. So the Soviet Union had only one party, which was the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So it was one party state, unlike the United States, which has a two-party state, Republican and Democrat. So those are the two political parties in the United States of America. But in the Soviet Union, we only had one political party, which was known as the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. That party was established in 1912 under the time when Lenin was in Switzerland, because he was exiled there. And that party would last all the way to August 24th, 1991, when Gorbachev resigned as General Secretary of Communist Party of the Soviet Union. And the Communist Party was outlawed. It was made against the law by the Russian Federation. And the Soviet economy was not doing very well under the the other leaders, to the three previous leaders, Brezhnev, Andropov, and Chernenko, because the people did not. If, for example, like if Soviet Union made a report on TV, right, they would say that, oh, the economy is doing very well. There's a lot of stuff in the stores, and there's a lot of food, and there's a lot of stuff in the store, and if people would go in the store, they would see nothing in the store, and there was no food and no water in that country, and people were pissed because they're like, what the hell is this crap? There's no stuff in the food stores. There's no stuff in the grocery stores, and that made people very angry. People were very angry at the Soviet government, and people were just upset at them because they told so many lies to people. They told so many lies to the people, and they actually believed what they were saying. They were brainwashing people. So that's basically their goal. They want people to think that, oh, there's a lot of food in the shelves and stuff. There's a lot of stuff in there, or whatever. And that was a lie. And also, the Soviet Union also had these plans, which were known as the 5-year plans, which were the plans to create more factories, the plans to create more factories, more buildings and stuff, and more cars. They need to create more cars. So those were basically the 5 plans. So those were basically the plans to build more cars and build more factories and rise the productivity. And that was basically the thing that was basically the Soviet Union had in their economy. So that was their plan. But that was all lie. They didn't do anything, because all they did was talk. That's all they did, and they didn't do anything. And that's kind of bullcrap, because that's all they did. They talk. They didn't do anything. And people were very upset at them because they went to they went to the store, and there was nothing there on the shelves, and there was no drinks on the shelves. And then also under Gorbachev time, this life in Soviet Union changed a lot, because he made his changes in the Soviet system. He reformed the Soviet political system, and he dissolved the Soviet Union as he was the leader of the country. And also, if you were looking for a job in the Soviet Union, or if you were trying to be a member of the Communist Party, those were one of the jobs in the Soviet Union. If you wanted to be a member of the Communist Party, you had to have a identification card if you wanted to be a part of the Communist Party. So those were basically one of the things you have to do to be a member of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. So that's basically the law. That was basically the law in that country. So many corrupt laws in that country. And then when Brezhnev died, people began to realize that Brezhnev was the bad guy, that Brezhnev brainwashed the people in the Soviet Union, and people began to wake up at what he did. They began to realize what Brezhnev did to the Soviet Union after his death, after he died as the leader of the Soviet Union on November 10, 1982. So, yep, that's how Soviet economy worked in the Soviet Union, and that's how it was in that country. So, I hope you learned something new, and I'll see you guys in the next video.